Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Courage to Identify podcast, Season 2, with me, Sharon Angel. Today, we are going to continue talking about crimes against women with Patricia Wenskunas. In part 1 of this topic, she told us a little bit about her story, how she navigated through this intense life situation, and how others can also learn to support survivors, the story that they tell, the situations that they go through. This episode, I am going to ask her more questions on how parents can deal with this with their kids. What conversations should they be having? How should they monitor them? Should they be overprotective? When it comes to sending them to school, their surroundings, how should parents and elders deal with these protectiveness or overprotectiveness? What should the legal system do? What should religion and culture do? Are there things that we should change or add to our daily conversations, daily decisions? We're going to dive into all of these questions with Patricia and ask her, how can we, as maybe someone who has survived domestic violence, intimate violence, or any kind of violence, or maybe you're just a listener wanting to know more about how to support someone who's gone through this. I am dedicating this episode to everyone who has gone through some kind of intense journey when it comes to emotional, physical, mental, domestic violence. I know you have been through a lot. I know it's a lot to take on life with. But I want you to know that I am here, my team is here, we are here to support you, to help you in any way possible, but more importantly, give you hope and encouragement to live life. Please continue to listen to this episode. Here's our conversation. Welcome back. We're talking to Patricia Wenskunas, the founder and CEO of Crime Survivors Resource Center. We've heard such amazing things, and hopefully you've learned something about victims and how to deal with shame, guilt, and the stigma of going through violence in your life. So I wanted to ask you a few questions to be aware and educate everyone to think about how can they find the instinct, or how can we make our instinct better to smell a predator? Would you give some tips, or are there anything that you would see in a person to say that, this is going the wrong way, this is turning into a different kind of relationship which might cause harm to me? How do you see that in a person?
I think we all have a gut instinct and a feeling. All of us, no matter what. We have it, but especially for women, we tend to push it away. Like something doesn't feel right, something doesn't smell right, something doesn't taste right, and yet we'll still eat it, we'll still touch it, we'll still push the feelings away. So I know myself, I had red flags, I had bad feelings. The instinct was there, but I ignored it and I pushed it away, maybe because as a woman, I didn't know my own value. I didn't know my boundaries. I didn't have the self-respect, maybe the dignity, the awareness, any of that kind of feeling. And so I feel like we all have it. Mm-hmm. We have to be able to take a moment to acknowledge and recognize it, always.
It's always good to know, not to live in fear, but be cognizant of what is happening to you, the area you're going to, the stories that are particular to that area. It's always good to know, of course, not navigate things in fear. Patricia, in the Eastern culture, we don't have these conversations about sex. We don't have conversations about the opposite gender. So how would you say, what are the things that parents or elders should have with their girl child and the boy child? One thing is the girls should be this way. They should dress this way. They should talk this way. They should act this way. But I think when it comes to crime survival and eradicating rape or bringing the percentage down, men and boys also contribute to that. So what conversations should be had? And can we go deeper than knowing what good touch and bad touch is? How do you see or view a fellow human at a young age?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very tough conversation. Again, I go back continuously and repeat saying in this climate, because this climate and the times have changed drastically. And for all cultures, I really do believe that, right? And so for me, I say we have to have the conversation and not to live in paranoia, not to be paranoid that something's going to happen to your child or to your loved one, and you don't want to scare children at all, but you can have age appropriate conversations with children. And I do think that it also crosses all boundaries. And I think that we do need to have strong conversations, and we need to let boys know that you don't hit women. And you don't hit girls. That's it. And I think they need to be taught at a very young age, no matter the culture. I think we need to tell young girls that, sex is not a tool. It's not something that's owed to anybody, that your body is your body. I always say now that your space is your space. Like, if you can't come past this space without my permission, I'm going to have hard conversations with my grandchildren and let them know what safe touch is, what it's not. That, and if somebody tells you, don't tell anybody, or I'm going to kill your mommy or your daddy, or I'm going to hurt you, or nobody's going to believe you, you keep telling until somebody does believe you. And if somebody else is hurt because of that, that's unfortunate, but it's still not your fault. If we have a safe circle, of which I always think every family should have a safe circle, whether it's once a week or once a month, where children are allowed to say whatever it is, even if they got themselves into trouble, they need to be able to come to the circle and share that in open lines of communication, where they're not going to get in trouble, but that they can learn from that experience as well. So children need to be able to have safe spaces, and they need to be able to be honest. And they, most importantly, above anything, is we need to believe our children. If children come to you and say, Uncle so-and-so touched me inappropriately, or Aunt so-and-so hit me this way, we need to believe them, because children typically do not lie. Sometimes parents force lies upon children, but if they're going to tell us, we need to listen and we need to believe children.
That's strong. That's strong. Today, we see these stories on the news about rape or somebody being hit and murdered and killed and thrown on the street even. So parents and the environment and the society is becoming overprotective of children, saying that they are safeguarding children and not exposing them to the real world. So what should kids be exposed to versus, watching movies or music? There's soft porn, and the way a woman is described, there are different things that happen. Of course, there's good to movies and music, but then there's also this thought process or this mindset that is slowly inculcated in the name of entertainment and the news and so on. So how not to be overprotected, how not to be overprotective, but expose the kids to certain things so they know the reality of the world.
Kids today know more than adults know, in all honesty. They're on their iPads, they're on tablets, they're looking at the media, they're learning from their friends, they're hearing things that you don't even know they know. So you can safeguard your children all that you want, but society is not safeguarding children, in all honesty. And so if you want your children to know something, you should be the one to tell them before their teacher or before their friend tells them or before the iPad or the game or the TV movie tells them. I think we can only safeguard them to a certain extent, but they need to hear it from their parents first before they hear it from outside influences. The media, the celebrity, all of that stuff is causing incredible damage to our children. Social media has causing incredible damage. As great as social media has become, as great as technology has become, it's also been very devastating for our youth as well. It's interesting because, you look outside and you realize when it's raining outside, for instance, and it brings back memories to me of running in the street and running in the puddles and just having fun. And my grandma saying, yes, look at, she's having so much fun. Or
Yes, kids
climbing a
don't play
tree.
outside anymore. That's so sad. Yeah, we grew
Yeah.
up playing in the sand, in the puddle. We used to play with sports outside, and that just bonds you with other kids. And yeah, and it's so sad that I don't see kids outside playing anymore. Yep.
There's no innocence in that degree anymore. And it's really sad, but it's also why we have youth that are getting into more trouble. More homeless, more drugs, more suicide is just running rampant in this climate. And so I think that we have to be able to decide what is right and what is wrong and what is safe for our children. And if we feel that a certain age is appropriate to share things with them, that's the parent's choice. And I don't think that we should really worry or be dictated by outside influences. Even some therapists, they will share, say this to a child, say that to a child, but ultimately don't be dictated by the doctor or the therapist or the profession. Know what's right in your heart, in your soul, in your family unit, and stick with that.
Mm. So parents should also be aware of what is going on when it comes to technology, the advances in society, what is happening in society, what are kids being exposed to. They also have to have an idea of that so that they can address things that they don't approve of or things that are not their family values. Now, coming to workplace reporting, when somebody who's been violated tells a friend and says, hey, this is my secret, keep it to yourself. But if they agree on reporting it to a supervisor, higher authority, there is this fear of being branded as tattletale, especially when the violence happens in the workplace. There's a fear of being an outcast or fear of having that on your record to say, I did this. I don't want to go through, whatever the process of reporting is. That's just a hassle. How do people address this in the workplace? What mindset should they have to either report or tell someone that something like this is happening to them or someone else?
I would hope that their human resources, their corporation, their business would have stuff set into place, but I know that that's not always the reality. I do know I've talked to many survivors that have said they didn't share anything at their workplace because they would be demeaned, they would be demoted, they may be fired, may be retaliated against, so they don't say anything. But then I've also seen the other side where they have spoken up and that the company has gotten rid of the abuser, the sexual assaulter, the predator that's working in that corporation, right? I've also heard of stories where a woman was a domestic violence survivor, and she was going to work every single day. At the time, she was a victim, and that she would have bruises up and down her arms, around her neck. And she said something to her coworker, and her coworker didn't want to say anything and actually journaled it. The coworker journaled every single day, the time, the date, everything in the journal. And then one day she seen the coworker wasn't coming to work, and she was wondering what happened to that coworker. And that person, because they didn't say anything and it wasn't reported, that person was murdered by her abuser. And the reason why the abuser then was incarcerated and held accountable for the crime was because that coworker kept that journal of every single date, time, all of that information at her job. So that person was eventually held accountable, but it always left me thinking, well, what if that person would have said something? Would that other person be alive still? But we don't know, and we can't blame the person for being silent and not saying anything because she said that she wouldn't say anything and she didn't, right? I always say something. If you see something, say something, do something, because you can change a life. Sometimes you want to have trust and you want to have a bond, especially with your coworkers. Mm-hmm. But listen, there's another job to be found. If you don't have to go through abuse and trauma to keep a job. There's plenty of other jobs out there. You can move, you can do many different things because your life is of value. And I would hate to see somebody have to be hurt for a paycheck.
There are survivors who seek the help of other survivors or seek the friendship or of other survivors. But there are relationships that end with other survivors because of personal dispute, difference of opinion, and so on. Can you talk to us a little about that? Can survivors be friends with each other and heal together?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're all different personalities. We all have different beliefs. I always say agree to disagree with respect. You're not going to believe and agree with everything, right? With each other. It's just not going to happen. We're all different. But I think that a lot of times, no matter what the crime was, is a lot of survivors, they can survive and thrive together. They can heal together also. They can have hope together in their lives. And when they get together with other survivors that have gone through similar things, but even if you have two domestic violence survivors, they don't feel the same. They don't go through the same healing process. Yes, they're surviving domestic violence, but they're completely different. But if they wake up at 2:00 in the morning and they can't sleep, and maybe they lit a candle, maybe they took a bath, maybe they went walking, maybe they journaled, they can help another survivor through that process. And some survivors that I know have become best of best friends. Some people, when they're victimized, they lose their friends. They lose almost all of their friends because their friends don't know who they are now. They don't like the person maybe that they've become. Maybe they were weak before and now they're strong. And that person doesn't know what to do with that strength of that new person, right? So we all change, but we all bond together because we all have that feeling of similarities together. So I feel that survivors can survive and thrive together. They can help one another through the process. They can give each other hope. They can give each other healing. And they can become family in a sense. Even sometimes they become more family than what their own blood is.
Mm. Do all people heal the same?
No, healing is different for every single human being, no matter what the situation, no matter what the circumstance is. Healing exists for some and healing doesn't exist for others. Also, healing could take 24 hours for one survivor and it could take 16 years for another survivor. One person may exercise, one person may crochet and make blankets. One person may go to a therapist, another may go to a place of worship. One person may just have to sit in their room for 6 months and stare at a white wall and have no hope or healing, but something could be said and that person can go get help and support. They may reach out to their friend, their family. So healing is different for every single person.
And you have to give each one of them the time to heal, the time and the space to heal. There is the cultural and religious aspect of talking about what happened to the survivor. But there is a taboo, especially when a religion or a culture comes into play. Why is there this taboo and how do we navigate it?
It's taboo because we allow it to be taboo. I think we have a choice, again, to be a voice for the voiceless, a voice for ourselves, a voice to say no more, whether it's family, whether it's place of worship, whether it's religion. We have a right and responsibility to change the past. In a sense, we can change the past. And then in another degree, we can't change the past because the past is the past and it's in the past, right? We can change the future. When I say we can change the past, we don't have to repeat the past, right? We don't have to live back what it was like 20 years ago, 30 years, 50 years ago. We have a right and a responsibility to say we're going to take ownership of the present and we're going to move forward with a future free of violence and trauma and triggers and shame and blame and guilt, even at the expense of sometimes ending family relationships, ending friendships, ending careers. Just because somebody is our blood and just because we're used to something doesn't mean that it has to be. We can say no, even at the cost of somebody putting shame and blame and guilt on us. Okay, but I only know what I know, and I know that I don't want to live in that space anymore. I want to be able to live with forgiveness. I want to be able to live without shame and blame and guilt. I want to live free from taboo, in a sense.
So you just told us a little bit of how to break that stigma, but how do we be clear on hope versus reality? Should we just be like, oh, everything's going to be fine, everything's going to be great in the name of hope, or to say, this is reality, it is going to take time? What would you say about that, hope versus reality?
We'll always have hope, no matter what. Hopefully, never lose the fact that there is always hope. And the reality is what you create. The reality is inclusive of hope as well. It is not going to be okay. I would never say to anybody it's going to be okay, because it's not going to be okay. But because what is okay? I always am left when somebody says to me, hey, Patricia, how are you doing? When they ask that question, they want me to say, I'm okay. Do they really want to be able to hear the long answer? For instance, if somebody is going through bankruptcy and they just lost their house, or their child was diagnosed with cancer, or they were a victim of a crime, their husband is cheating on them, or they're getting divorced. Can you imagine saying, when somebody says, hey, Patricia, how are you doing? And it's like, oh my gosh, my cousin just died. My husband left me. I was a victim of they're like, whoa, wait a minute. I just wanted to know if you're okay. And not every day am I going to be okay. Am I okay in life? Of course, I'm alive, I'm breathing, I'm blessed, I'm grateful. For each and every breath that I have, I am sincerely grateful. And on the days that I'm not feeling okay, I try to focus on the fact that I'm alive. If just today I can focus on the fact that I'm alive, then I am okay, right? I have hope. So I think letting people know that there's a difference and that not everything is going to be okay every day. And that is okay in a sense, because that means that you have hope.
Patricia, one of the things that matters to you is that victims are not provided equal rights as molesters and criminals. Why do you think that happens? And do you think the legal system is slow? What are things that can happen to change that?
I think a lot of it is legislation. I believe that our laws have changed drastically even the last couple of years to be able to support the offenders and the criminals over the victims, to the extent that the offenders and criminals are actually referred to as the victims and survivors, more so than the innocent victims and survivors that are, by no choice of their own, were victimized and traumatized. I think it's legislations. I think it's our elected officials that we vote into office. I think the climate has changed drastically towards that. And I think that it's really sad. I would like to be able to see that there's going to be a time to where we can balance the scales of justice. I do believe in rehabilitation, with the exception of two, and that's intentional murder and molestation of a child. I don't believe that you can be rehabilitated, and God forgive me for that. But I also believe in rehabilitation. I feel like there should be second chances, 77 chances, but I also feel that there should be accountability and justice. And I think that we've lost that throughout the nation right now. We're doing too much coddling of the offenders, of which leads into more homeless, more crime, more other circumstances. And the criminals and offenders, the ones that commit the crimes, are provided so many rights. And yet victims are not. But at the end of the day, no matter what happens with our laws and with legislation, it always comes back to me to allow victims and survivors an opportunity to heal and not be defined by what happened to them.
So give us an idea of what happens to the victims and survivors when the legal system is slow, when justice is slow to be received, and people in leadership positions are not taking fast enough actions.
I feel that it re-victimizes a victim. It kind of stalls their healing. It gives them frustration, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, frustration, so many different feelings, mixed emotions, and re-victimizing. Again, it re-victimizes a victim that's already been through so much when we're not there to help, to support, to build up, and to give them justice.
Last question. So listen up, everybody, because I think this is the most important question and the most important conversation that we'll be having in this entire episode. What better can the government and society do to help victims and survivors?
Powerful. Now that could be like an hour or 2 hour answer, right? But let me just sum it up, is to be able to, if our government, if our elected officials, if our family, our friends, our community would listen, and not only listen, but hear victims and survivors and believe them. and ask a victim and a survivor what they need to be able to have hope and healing. Don't stay within a book or a box or think that we can delegate and we can dictate what a victim and a survivor needs, because if you haven't been a victim or a survivor, you don't know. You can say what you learned through your education, what the book says, but not two victims are alike. So I would say to our government, balance the scales of justice, hold those accountable to the law of what crime they committed, give justice to victims, and balance the scale. So if you're going to give an attorney or you're going to give whatever it is to an offender, please give that equal to the victim and to the survivor. And be able to, again, if nothing else, treat a victim with respect and dignity, just like you would want yourself, your mother, your sister, your brother, your aunt, your uncle, your cousin treated. That's how we should treat victims. Believing them, listening to them, hearing, and providing whatever they need so that they can heal throughout their life moving forward.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for your time, wise words, valuable words, and thank you for giving us an insight to what happens with victims and survivors and what we as a society can do to help them and also avoid any kind of crime, any kind of violence in a girl or a young boy's personal life. Thank you so much for your time. So happy to talk to you.
Thank you so very much.
Finding a solution to these crimes against women doesn't stop with that conversation. It starts with what we do with this conversation in our everyday lives. So when someone comes to you, whether your daughter or your son, and tells you that something horrific happens to them, some of the key takeaways that we have listened to today is to, number one, believe them and create a safe space for them. Of course, we do not know how they would feel, what they are going through, but it is important that they know that they have our support. There are other key takeaways that Patricia had talked to us about: how to raise our children, what to say to them, what not to say to them, what the legal system should do, what we as individuals must do. But I think the biggest thing that we learned from these conversations, both in our previous episode and from this episode, is to be able to be a place where they can share what they are going through, to be able to support them in this intense journey. And that starts with you wanting the survivor to heal. The reason I do these episodes focusing on crimes against women is so that the next generation will not be harmed by these same sexual, mental, emotional acts. We can go on talking about this all day and say, oh, this should not be done, that should not be done, and this is their fault, this is that person's fault. But at the end of the day, when a crime is happening, you can be someone who stops it or aids that crime from still happening. So you as a parent, you as a passerby on the road, you as a teacher, you as someone in positions of power, you can stop it or you can allow it. So I hope this conversation with Patricia was an eye-opener for you to be able to know what to do and what not to do, but more importantly, make decisions on a daily basis or at each moment to tell yourself, am I going to stop this assault or this abuse from happening, or am I going to aid it? This decision is crucial because even if it doesn't happen to you, you will be a big part of the solution or the problem of crimes against women. Again, I dedicate this episode to those who have gone through intense violence. My heart is with you. My team is with you. And if you need any support or someone to just talk to, I am here. And to anyone who knows someone who's gone through this kind of pain, please reach out to them and be a supporting source, a hope-giving source to all of them so they can find healing, rehabilitation, and freedom in their life and their identity. Thank you for tuning into this podcast, tuning into this episode. For more information, you can always visit SharonAngel.com to find more of my book and my thoughts and so many new projects that we have coming up. This is Sharon Angel signing off. Thank you for listening in.